Alright everyone, settle in for tonight's exploration. We're veering off the well-trodden path of heroic sagas and stepping into something a touch more unvarnished. Prepare for a deep dive not into tales of medical breakthroughs or compassionate care, but into the forgotten suffering and the stark, often terrifying, daily existence of a patient confined within an early 19th century asylum for the insane, perhaps somewhere in the grimmier corners of England. That quaint notion of a peaceful sanctuary for troubled minds, well, the unvarnished truth for many incarcerated within those imposing stone walls was often a far cry, a disorienting world of cold indifference, bewildering treatments, and profound isolation, and frankly your modern understanding of mental health care would seem an almost utopian dream. So, find your coziest spot. If you appreciate a journey into the raw, unfiltered past, a like on the video would be fantastic, and do consider subscribing for more of these historical reality checks. As always, I'm curious to know where you're joining us from tonight. Drop a comment with your location and time. It's always a highlight seeing our global community. Okay, perhaps dim those lights, let a soft ambient sound fill the room, and let's embark on tonight's rather sobering journey together. Your entry into this imposing, often fortress-like institution was probably not voluntary. Perhaps your family, unable to cope with your melancholia, your mania, or simply your eccentricities, sought a parish order for your committal, or maybe a local magistrate, deeming your behavior a public nuisance or a sign of moral derangement, had you forcibly removed from society. There was little understanding of the nuances of the human mind then. Lunacy was a broad, terrifying category, and the asylum was seen less as a place of healing, and more as a place of confinement, to protect society from you, and perhaps you from yourself, though the methods were questionable. The journey itself might have been a blur of fear and confusion, perhaps in a jolting cart, or restrained if you were agitated. The first sight of the asylum, tall barred windows, heavy doors and an air of palpable gloom, would do little to soothe your anxiety. You are processed, your name perhaps noted in a ledger, your few possessions taken. The air inside is cold, carrying the faint, unsettling odors of unwashed bodies, stale food, damp stone and carbolic acid, or other crude disinfectants, that do little to mask the underlying stench of human misery. You are led down long, echoing corridors, the sound of your own footsteps, and perhaps the distant, indistinct cries or moans of other inmates. The only sounds breaking an oppressive silence or a sudden cacophony. You are assigned a cell or perhaps a bed in a larger, crowded ward. The cell is small, barren, perhaps with a straw-filled mattress on the floor or a crude wooden bedstead. A single high, barred window lets in a sliver of gray light, offering no view of the outside world, only a patch of indifferent sky. There is a slop bucket in the corner. This is your new world. The loss of identity begins almost immediately. Your clothes are replaced with a coarse, shapeless uniform, rough against your skin. You are no longer known by your full name, perhaps, but as number 27 or by a derogatory nickname. The staff, often poorly paid, untrained and overworked, may address you with indifference, impatience or outright contempt. You are a lunatic, an inmate, a patient in name only, your individuality slowly being eroded by the institution's dehumanizing routine. The daily routine, if one can call it that, is brutally monotonous. You are woken early, perhaps by the clanging of a bell or the harsh shouts of an attendant. Meals are served in a communal dining hall, or sometimes in your cell. The food is meager, unappetizing, and often nutritionally deficient. Watery gruel, stale bread, perhaps some boiled meat of questionable quality. Eating is a hurried, joyless affair, often done in silence or amidst the unsettling sounds of other disturbed individuals. The treatments you endure are based on the era's primitive understanding of mental illness, often rooted in the idea of restoring balance to the body or subduing unruly behavior. Bleeding and purging are common, intended to remove excess humors, but in reality only weakening you further. You might be strapped into a spinning chair, whirled at high speeds until you vomit or lose consciousness, a supposed cure for mania, or subjected to hydrotherapy, icy baths or powerful jets of cold water aimed at your body, designed to shock the system into compliance. Restraint is a constant feature of asylum life, especially if you exhibit any signs of agitation or what is deemed unmanageable behavior. You might be strapped to your bed for days, or confined in a straitjacket, your limbs aching, your skin chafed, or perhaps you are placed in the crib, a coffin-like wooden box, with a slatted lid, where you can barely move. These periods of restraint are terrifying, isolating, and often serve only to increase your distress and confusion. The sounds of the asylum are a torment in themselves. The jangling of keys, the heavy thud of closing doors, the creak of attendants' boots on stone floors, and then there are the human sounds, the incoherent mumbling of some patients, the sudden piercing shrieks of others, the weeping, the laughter that sounds more like madness than joy, the rhythmic banging of a head against a padded wall. There is no peace, no true silence, only a constant barrage of unsettling noise or a heavy, watchful quiet. Sanitation is appalling, cells and wards are often overcrowded and poorly ventilated, bedding is infrequently changed and may be soiled, the slop buckets in cells are emptied irregularly, lice, fleas and other vermin are rampant, the stench of unhygienic conditions is pervasive, a constant reminder of the degradation you endure. Disease, such as typhus or dysentery, can sweep through the asylum, adding physical illness to your mental torment. Moments of lucidity, if they come, can be the cruelest torture. For a brief period, the fog in your mind might clear, and you see your surroundings, your fellow inmates, your own condition, with a terrible clarity. The despair, the hopelessness of your situation, can be overwhelming. You might remember your former life, your family, your freedom, and the contrast with your present reality is a fresh wave of agony. You might pray for the fog to return, to dull the sharp edges of your suffering. Interaction with staff is often minimal and functional, or worse, abusive. Attendants, often drawn from the lowest rungs of society with no medical training, view their charges with fear, disgust, or a callous indifference. Kindness is rare, beatings or rough handling, while perhaps not officially sanctioned, can occur, especially in response to perceived defiance. You learn to be wary, to make yourself as inconspicuous as possible. The lack of any meaningful occupation is another burden. Days stretch endlessly, filled with nothing but confinement, fear, and the chaotic company of other disturbed minds. Some asylums might have workrooms, where quieter patients are put to mind-numbing tasks like picking oakum or sewing, but for many there is nothing to do but pace their cells, rock back and forth, or stare blankly at the wall. Boredom and enforced idleness can be as maddening as any internal turmoil. Visits from family, if they are permitted at all, are infrequent and often traumatic. Your loved ones may be shocked and distressed by your appearance, your surroundings, the person you have become. You might struggle to communicate, to bridge the gap between your nightmarish world and theirs. Their visits can be a painful reminder of everything you have lost, and their departures can leave you in an even deeper state of despair. The other inmates are a gallery of human suffering. Some are violent and unpredictable, their mania a source of constant fear. Others are sunk in a profound, unreachable melancholia, silent and motionless for days on end. Some suffer from delusions, talking to unseen entities or believing themselves to be historical figures. You might find a fleeting moment of connection with another soul, a shared glance of understanding, but mostly you are surrounded by a sea of individual, isolated miseries. The architecture of the asylum itself is designed for control and confinement, not comfort or healing. Thick stone walls, heavily barred windows, locked doors, and long sterile corridors create an atmosphere of imprisonment. Exercise, if allowed, might be a brief period of shuffling in a high-walled courtyard, under the watchful eyes of attendants. There is no beauty, no softness, no connection to the natural world to soothe your troubled spirit. The classification of patients is often crude and arbitrary. You might be housed with individuals whose conditions are vastly different from your own, whose behavior is deeply disturbing or frightening to you. The noisy are kept separate from the quiet, the violent from the harmless, but these distinctions are often superficial, and the resulting environment can be chaotic and terrifying for everyone. The concept of cure is largely absent. The asylum's primary function is custodial, to keep you and others like you out of sight, out of mind. Release is rare, especially if your committal was for a serious condition or if you have no family willing or able to take you back. For many, the asylum is a life sentence, a place where they will slowly deteriorate and eventually die, forgotten by the outside world. Sleep offers little escape. Your straw mattress is lumpy and uncomfortable, perhaps infested with vermin. The nights are cold, your single blanket inadequate. The sounds of the asylum, the moans, the cries, the clanging of doors, continue unabated. Nightmares are frequent, your disturbed mind replaying a loop of fears and anxieties. You often wake as exhausted and tormented as when you lay down. Religious services might be held, a chaplain perhaps offering words of comfort or admonition. For some this might provide a flicker of solace, for others the words ring hollow in the face of their daily suffering, and the apparent indifference of God to their plight. The traditional comforts of faith are severely tested within these walls of despair. The staff's understanding of your condition is filtered through the era's prevailing theories, that madness is a result of moral failing, hereditary taint, or physical imbalance. There is little concept of a psychological or emotional basis for your distress. Therefore, treatments are aimed at the body, or at enforcing discipline and order, rather than addressing the turmoil within your mind. You are a broken machine to be physically coerced back into function. The powerlessness is absolute. You have no control over your environment, your daily routine, your body, or even your own thoughts, which are often a source of torment. Every aspect of your existence is dictated by others, by the rules of the institution, by the whims of the attendant. This complete stripping of agency is profoundly dehumanizing, and can crush even the strongest spirit. You might witness acts of cruelty, or be a victim yourself. While overt, sadistic abuse might not be the norm everywhere, neglect, rough handling, and a callous disregard for your comfort and dignity are endemic. The attendants, often brutalized by their own lives and the conditions of their work, can easily take out their frustrations on the helpless inmates in their charge. Fear of the staff is a constant undercurrent. The food, beyond being unappetizing, is often insufficient to maintain health. Malnutrition can exacerbate existing conditions and make you more susceptible to disease. You might dream of a simple, nourishing meal, of fresh fruit or vegetables, of anything other than the endless cycle of watery gruel and stale bread. Hunger gnaws at you, a dull ache compounding your other miseries. Any attempt to express your individuality, to assert your will, or to question the asylum's regime is likely to be interpreted as a symptom of your madness. Further proof that you require treatment or restraint. You learn that passivity, a cowed obedience, is the safest course, even if it means surrendering another piece of your soul. Conformity is enforced, individuality extinguished. The passage of time becomes meaningless. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. There is nothing to look forward to, no milestones to mark, only the endless repetition of the same bleak routine. The future is a terrifying void, or simply an extension of the present suffering. Hope, if it ever existed, slowly withers and dies in the oppressive atmosphere. If you have moments of clarity, you might desperately try to convince a visiting physician or a rare sympathetic attendant that you are sane, that you are ready to leave, but your pleas are often dismissed, your lucid arguments seen as the cunning deceptions of a deranged mind. The very label of lunatic is a prison from which it is almost impossible to escape, regardless of your true mental state. The isolation from the outside world is profound. News of current events, of your family, of the life you once knew, rarely penetrates the asylum wall. You exist in a timeless, hermetically sealed bubble of misery. This disconnection from reality can further distort your perception and deepen your sense of alienation and despair. You are, in effect, buried alive. The other patient's delusions can be a source of bizarre, sometimes frightening interactions. One might believe they are a king, another that they are persecuted by demons. You navigate this landscape of shattered minds, trying to avoid provoking those who are agitated, perhaps finding a strange temporary camaraderie with those whose delusions are harmless or even oddly poetic. The asylum's attempts at moral treatment, if any exist in your particular institution, might involve enforced labor in the asylum's laundry, kitchen, or gardens. This is presented as therapeutic, a way to instill discipline and order, but it is often just another form of drudgery, performed under harsh conditions, with little reward, other than perhaps a slightly better meal or a moment away from the confines of the ward. The architecture often includes airing courts, high-walled, barren enclosures, where patients are allowed to walk for a short period each day, weather permitting. These are bleak, joyless spaces, offering no view of the outside world, no greenery, no beauty. It is exercise in a cage, doing little to lift your spirits or connect you to the natural rhythms of life. The lack of intellectual stimulation is crushing. There are no books, no music, no art, no meaningful conversation. Your mind, if it is not already consumed by its own internal chaos, is starved of any external input. This intellectual deprivation can lead to a further decline in your mental faculties, a dulling of your senses, a retreat into an even deeper internal world. The fear of the treatments is a constant shadow. The sight of the restraining chair, the cold dread of the hydrotherapy room, the anticipation of the physician's visit with his lancets and purging potions, these loom large in your daily consciousness. You might try to feign compliance, to appear calm and rational, simply to avoid these terrifying interventions. Personal possessions are almost non-existent. Perhaps a small hidden memento from your past life, a locket, a ribbon, a smooth stone, is your only link to who you once were. If discovered, even this might be confiscated. The institution strives to strip you of all individuality, to make you a blank slate, a patient indistinguishable from any other.
The staff often uses a system of rewards and punishments to control behavior. Compliance might earn you slightly better food or a less harsh form of restraint. Defiance or agitation will inevitably lead to harsher measures. You learn to navigate this crude system, to calculate the risks and benefits of any action, your life reduced to a grim game of institutional survival. The cries and screams of other patients in the night are a particularly difficult torment. Just as you are drifting into a fitful sleep, a sudden shriek from a nearby cell can jolt you awake, your heart pounding, your nerves raw. The darkness amplifies every sound, every imagined threat, making the nights a landscape of auditory horror. If you are deemed recovered, a rare and often arbitrary judgment, your release is not necessarily a return to your old life. The stigma of having been confined in an asylum can follow you, making it difficult to find work, to be accepted back into your community, or even by your own family. The asylum leaves an indelible mark, even if you manage to escape its physical wall. The sheer boredom can be as corrosive as the more active forms of suffering. With nothing to do, nothing to see, nothing to hope for, your mind can turn in on itself, replaying your sorrows, magnifying your fears, or sinking into a profound and listless apathy. The hours, days, and weeks stretch before you, an empty, meaningless expanse. The asylum often has a peculiar smell, a mixture of unwashed bodies, stale food, dampness, carbolic acid, and something else, something indefinable that speaks of concentrated human misery and despair. This odor clings to your clothes, your hair, your very being, a constant reminder of where you are. It is the perfume of hopelessness. You might observe the changing seasons only through the quality of light from your high, barred window, or the temperature of the vibrant colors of autumn, the fresh green of spring. These are denied to you. Your world is a monotonous palette of gray stone, drab uniforms and shadowy corridors. This sensory deprivation further isolates you from the natural world. The hierarchy among the staff, from the visiting physician, often a distant august figure, down to the lowest, most brutal attendant, is a microcosm of the outside world's power structures. You are at the very bottom, with no rights, no voice, no one to appeal to. This reinforces your sense of absolute powerlessness. If you are female, your reasons for committal might be even more tenuous: defiance of a husband, postnatal depression misunderstood as madness, or simply being an inconvenient woman. Your experiences within the asylum might also include specific gender-based vulnerabilities, or forms of neglect. The system is often doubly harsh for women deemed mad. The rare moments of human kindness, a sympathetic glance from another patient, a less harsh word from an attendant, a smuggled piece of bread, shine with an almost unbearable brightness in the overwhelming gloom. These tiny acts of compassion are all that stand between you and complete dehumanization, fragile reminders that humanity can persist even in the darkest of places. You might try to create a small secret world for yourself within your cell, scratching patterns on the wall, talking to an imaginary companion, hoarding a tiny found object. These are desperate attempts to maintain a sense of self, to carve out a tiny space of personal meaning in an environment designed to crush it. The asylum's records, if any are kept with care, will reduce your life to a few stark entries: name, date of admission, supposed ailment, treatments administered, date of death or rarely discharged. Your rich internal world, your history, your hopes, your fears, none of this is deemed worthy of note. You are a case study, a statistic, not a person. The public's perception of asylums in this era is often one of morbid curiosity or profound fear. Bedlam becomes a byword for chaos and madness. Some asylums even allow public viewing of patients for a fee, a grotesque form of entertainment that further dehumanizes the inmates. You are an exhibit in a gallery of suffering. The walls of your cell become your entire horizon. You trace the cracks in the stone, watch the way the light shifts through the barred window, listen to the sounds from the corridor. Your world shrinks to these tiny immediate details, your mind clinging to them in an effort to stay anchored, to avoid being completely lost in the internal chaos, or the external void. You might witness the death of other patients, from disease, from the harshness of the treatments, or from sheer despair. Their bodies are removed with little ceremony. Each death is a stark reminder of your own mortality, of the precariousness of your existence within these walls. It deepens your sense of hopelessness, your conviction that there is no escape but the grave. The transition from being a person with a life, a family, a place in the world, to being an inmate of an asylum is a brutal, disorienting process. It involves the systematic stripping away of your identity, your dignity, your agency. You are remade in the institution's image, a mad person, a dependent, a non-entity. The very concept of time warps, and without meaningful activity, without regular contact with the outside world, without hope for the future, days become indistinguishable from one another. An hour can feel like an eternity, A year can pass in a blur of monotonous suffering. You are adrift in a sea of undifferentiated, agonizing time. If you retain any spark of your former self, you might cling to memories of your past life with a desperate intensity. The face of a loved one, the sound of laughter, the warmth of a summer day, these memories become precious, painful treasures, a reminder of a world that now seems impossibly distant, perhaps even unreal. They are both a comfort and a torment. Ultimately, your existence is defined by a profound and terrifying loneliness. Even if surrounded by other inmates, you are isolated in your own private hell, your thoughts and feelings incomprehensible or irrelevant to those around you. The asylum is a place where human connection withers, where the spirit is starved, and where hope goes to die a slow, agonizing death.
In the heart of medieval Europe, in the quiet, firelit scriptoriums of countless monasteries, the collective knowledge of the Western world was preserved by the patient labor of human hands. Here, amidst the scent of aging parchment and ink made from oak galls and soot, monks and scribes hunched over wooden desks, painstakingly copying texts, letter by painstaking letter. A single book, a Bible or a classical treatise, could take months, even years to complete. Each copy was a unique work of art, but also susceptible to human error. The small slips of the pen that could alter meanings over generations of transcription. Books were magnificent, rare and exceedingly expensive treasures, their wisdom accessible only to a tiny privileged elite of clerics and nobles. This was a world of scarce information, where the flow of ideas was a slow, meandering trickle. But in the mid-15th century, in the bustling German city of Mainz, on the Rhine River, a secretive goldsmith was perfecting an invention that would unleash a torrent, a technological revolution that would irrevocably alter the course of religion, science, politics, and the very consciousness of the Western world. The man at the center of this revolution was Johannes Gutenberg. Born into a patrician family in Mainz, he was trained in the sophisticated arts of metallurgy, gem cutting, and goldsmithing. His world was one of precision craftsmanship, working with metals, creating alloys, and understanding the mechanics of presses used for minting coins or making wine. These skills, seemingly unrelated to the world of books, would prove to be the essential ingredients for his audacious vision. Gutenberg possessed an inventor's ambition and a desire to find a method for what was then called ars artificialiter scribendi, the art of writing artificially. He envisioned a way to reproduce texts, mechanically, with speed, accuracy and at a fraction of the cost of manual transcription. For years, first in Strasbourg and later back in Mainz, he worked in secret, consumed by his quest. The challenge he faced was immense, and its solution required not one, but a trio of interconnected innovations. The first and most crucial was the concept of movable type. While block printing, where a whole page was carved from a single piece of wood, had existed for centuries, it was inflexible and the wood wore down quickly. Gutenberg's genius lay in creating individual reusable letters cast from a durable metal alloy. This was a task of immense complexity. Each letter, number and punctuation mark, had to be carved in reverse on the end of a hard steel punch. This punch was then hammered into a softer copper block, creating a mold or matrix. Into this matrix, a molten alloy of lead, tin and antimony was poured, creating a single piece of type. This process had to be repeated hundreds, even thousands of times, for each character, and every piece of type had to be of a precisely uniform height, to create an even printing surface. The second innovation was the ink. The water-based inks used by scribes for writing on parchment would simply run off metal type. Gutenberg needed an ink that was viscous enough to adhere to the metal surfaces, but would also transfer cleanly and sharply to paper. After much experimentation, he developed a new formula, a varnish-like ink based on linseed oil and soot, more akin to an oil paint than a writing ink. The third element was the press itself. To apply firm, even pressure across an entire page of set type, Gutenberg adapted the screw press, a familiar piece of technology used for pressing grapes for wine and squeezing water from paper. His printing press allowed a printer to slide a frame of type under the platen, turn a large wooden handle to lower the screw, and transfer the ink from the type to the paper in a single powerful motion. It was the masterful synthesis of these three elements, durable movable type, oil-based ink, and the screw press, that constituted Gutenberg's revolutionary invention. Such an ambitious project required significant capital, far more than Gutenberg himself possessed. Around 1450, he entered into a fateful partnership with a wealthy Mainz moneylender and lawyer named Johann Fust. Fust provided a substantial loan to help Gutenberg set up a workshop, known as the Work of the Books. With Fust's financial backing, Gutenberg and his small team of assistants, including a skilled young calligrapher named Peter Schuffer, who had worked as a scribe in Paris, set about their great work. The first major project they undertook was the printing of the Bible. It was a logical choice, being the most important and revered text in Christendom, and one guaranteed to have a market among wealthy churches and monasteries. Over the next few years, from roughly 1452 to 1455, the workshop painstakingly produced what is now known as the Gutenberg Bible, or the 42-line Bible. It was a monumental achievement, not just technologically, but also aesthetically. Gutenberg was not merely trying to print a book, he was trying to create a work of art that could rival the beauty of the finest illuminated manuscripts. The typeface he designed was a complex and elegant Gothic script, mimicking the formal handwriting of the best scribe. The layout was spacious and clear, with 2 columns of 42 lines per page. Spaces were left blank for rubricators and illuminators to later add the ornate colored capitals, headlines and marginal decorations by hand, thus blending the new mechanical process with traditional artistry. The workshop is believed to have produced around 180 copies, a colossal number compared to the time it would have taken a single scribe to produce just one. Yet at the very pinnacle of his technical triumph, Gutenberg faced personal disaster. His relationship with his financial backer Johann Fust had soured. Fust, likely impatient for a return on his considerable investment, brought a lawsuit against Gutenberg in 14. Gutenberg, having poured all the money into the development and production process, was unable to pay. The court ruled in Fust's favor. He took possession of the workshop, the presses, the type, and most of the nearly completed Bible. Gutenberg, the visionary inventor, was left financially ruined, pushed out of the very enterprise he had created. Fust, in partnership with the now experienced Peter Schuffer, who would later become his son-in-law, continued the printing business, becoming the first commercially successful printing firm in Europe. While Gutenberg's personal story is one of tragic irony, his invention could not be contained. The seeds of his revolution, carried by printers who had worked in his shop or learned the new art in Mainz, were scattered across Europe with astonishing speed. After Mainz was sacked in a local conflict in 1462, many printers fled the city, further accelerating the dissemination of the technology. Within a decade of the printing of the Gutenberg Bible, presses were established in Italy. By the 1470s, they were operating in France, Spain, the Low Countries, and England. By the end of the 15th century, less than 50 years after Gutenberg's invention, printing presses were active in over 250 European cities, and had produced an estimated 20 million books, a number that dwarfed the entire output of the preceding millennium of scribal culture. The slow trickle of information had become an unstoppable flood. The consequences of this information revolution were profound and far-reaching, fundamentally reshaping European society. The first major beneficiary was the Renaissance itself. The revival of interest in the classical learning of Greece and Rome, which had been a slow scholarly movement, was dramatically accelerated. Printers like Aldus Manutius in Venice produced elegant and affordable editions of Greek and Roman classics, making the works of Plato, Aristotle, Cicero and Virgil available to a much wider audience of scholars, students and educated laypeople. This easy access to a common body of texts fostered a pan-European intellectual community, and fueled the humanist inquiry that was at the heart of the Renaissance. If printing fueled the Renaissance, it was the very engine of the Protestant Reformation. In 1517, a German monk and theology professor named Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, questioning certain practices of the Catholic Church. In the age of the scribe, such a document might have remained the subject of a local academic debate, but Luther's theses were quickly printed and distributed, fanning out across Germany and Europe within weeks. The printing press allowed Luther's ideas, and those of other reformers like John Calvin, to bypass the traditional hierarchy and control of the Church, and speak directly to the people in a way that had never before been possible. The mass printing of pamphlets, polemical tracts, and satirical woodcuts turned the Reformation into the first major mass media campaign. Crucially, Luther's translation of the Bible into vernacular German, printed in 1522, allowed ordinary people to read the scriptures for themselves for the first time, a foundational principle of Protestantism. The Reformation was, in many respects, a child of the printing press. The scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries was likewise enabled by Gutenberg's invention. Science depends on the accurate sharing and accumulation of data and observations. Before printing, This was extraordinarily difficult. Hand-drawn diagrams of plants or anatomical structures became distorted through repeated copying. Astronomical tables were riddled with scribal errors. The printing press changed everything. The groundbreaking anatomical work of Andreas Vesalius, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, published in 1543, could be printed with hundreds of detailed and accurate woodcut illustrations. The complex celestial model of Nicolaus Copernicus in his De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, also published in 1543, could be disseminated with its precise mathematical arguments and diagrams. Scientists like Galileo, Kepler and Newton could build upon the accurately transmitted work of their predecessors and share their own discoveries with a rapidly growing international scientific community, fostering collaboration, verification and debate. Beyond these grand intellectual movements, the printing press gradually transformed the very fabric of society. Over time, as books became cheaper and more abundant, literacy rates, while still low by modern standards, began to rise beyond the confines of the clergy and the high nobility. The act of printing helped to standardize and codify vernacular languages, solidifying national identities. It created new industries and professions, from papermaking and type founding to bookselling and publishing. It also created what we now call a public sphere. The circulation of printed newspapers and pamphlets allowed for the formation of public opinion on political and social issues, on a scale previously unimaginable, presenting a new and powerful challenge to the authority of both church and state, who could no longer easily monopolize or control the flow of information. Johannes Gutenberg died in 1468, in relative obscurity, his name largely unknown to many who were already benefiting from his world-changing invention. He never saw the immense transformations his work would unleash. His revolution was not one of swords or crowns, but of lead, ink and paper. It was a revolution of the mind. By making knowledge reproducible, affordable, and accessible, the printing press democratized information, empowered individuals, and shattered the intellectual monopolies of the medieval world. It was the key technology that propelled Europe into the modern age, laying the groundwork for the great religious, scientific and political upheavals that would follow. The silent, meticulous work of the man from Mainz set in motion a chain reaction that continues to resonate today, a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin, not with a shout, but with the quiet steady press of a single well-inked page.
In the fertile plains and rugged mountains of the Japanese archipelago, a unique warrior class emerged from the provincial estates of the ancient world, their identity forged in loyalty, honed by conflict, and defined by the keen edge of a tempered steel sword. For nearly 1,000 years they would dominate the social and political landscape of their nation, their story a sweeping epic of ferocious battles, intricate court politics, profound philosophical development, and ultimately a poignant, tragic decline. They were the samurai, the warrior nobility of Japan, and their saga is not simply a tale of warfare, but the story of a social order's rise to absolute power, its long peaceful reign as a bureaucratic elite, and its eventual reluctant surrender to the inexorable march of modernity. The origins of the samurai can be traced to the Heian period, an era stretching from the late 8th to the late 12th century, when the imperial court in Heian-kyo, modern-day Kyoto, cultivated a world of exquisite refinement, poetry, and intricate courtly etiquette. But while the emperor and his courtiers engaged in aesthetic pursuits, their control over the outlying provinces weakened. Powerful provincial clans, tasked with managing vast agricultural estates, began to raise and train their own private armed forces to protect their lands, enforce their authority and engage in disputes with their rivals. These early warriors, known as samurai, meaning those who serve, were primarily mounted archers, their skill with the longbow, the yumi, being their most prized martial art. Clad in heavy, boxy armor known as oyuri and bound by a nascent code of fierce loyalty to their clan leaders, these provincial warriors gradually became the true power in the land, a stark contrast to the effete aristocracy of the capital. The ascendancy of this new warrior class was cemented in the late 12th century during the Genpei War, a devastating 5-year conflict between the two most powerful samurai clans, the Taira and the Minamoto. The war, a brutal saga of epic battles, naval engagements and personal heroism, culminated in a decisive victory for the Minamoto clan under their brilliant leader, Minamoto no Yori. In 1192, Yoritomo, rather than attempting to rule from within the imperial court, established a new military government, the Bakufu or shogunate, in his provincial stronghold of Kamakura. he took the title of shogun, or supreme military command. This event marked a fundamental shift in Japanese history. The emperor was relegated to a purely symbolic spiritual role, while real political power now resided with the shogun and the samurai class that supported him. Japan had entered its long feudal age. It was during the centuries of samurai rule that their distinctive ethical code, later known as Bushido, the way of the warrior, began to evolve and solidify. Bushido was not a single written text, but an unwritten evolving set of principles that governed a samurai's life and conduct. At its core was the paramount virtue of chuji, absolute loyalty and devotion to one's lord, a bond that superseded even family ties. A samurai's life belonged to his master, and he was expected to serve him faithfully, even unto death. Closely linked to this was the concept of mio, or personal honor and reputation. A samurai's public image and the honor of his name were of immense importance, and any perceived insult could have deadly consequences. To maintain this honor, a warrior was expected to cultivate courage, stoicism, self-discipline, and a profound indifference to pain and death. This stoic acceptance found its ultimate, ritualized expression in seppuku, or harakiri, a form of ritual suicide by disembowelment, which was seen as a way to atone for failure, protest injustice, or avoid the dishonor of capture. Over time, particularly through the influence of Zen Buddhism, Bushido also incorporated elements of compassion, integrity, and a deep appreciation for aesthetics, creating a complex and often paradoxical philosophy of the warrior poet. The stability of the Kamakura shogunate eventually eroded, leading to a period of intense and prolonged civil war known as the Sengoku Jidai, or the Age of Warring States, which lasted from the mid-15th to the early 17th century. This was a time of chaos and constant conflict, where the authority of the shogun collapsed, and powerful regional lords, the daimyo, carved out their own domains and battled ceaselessly for supremacy. This was the crucible in which the samurai as a military class reached theirs. Warfare became more sophisticated and larger in scale. Great castles of stone and wood rose across the landscape, and tactics evolved. The introduction of firearms by Portuguese traders in 1543 had a profound impact, as the arquebus, though initially disdained by some traditionalist samurai, proved devastatingly effective in battle, particularly when used by organized formations of lower-class foot soldiers, the Eishid. This era of turmoil eventually produced three of the most formidable figures in Japanese history: the three great unifiers, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, who through a combination of military genius, political cunning, and ruthless ambition, gradually pacified the country and brought the long century of war to an end. Following his decisive victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu consolidated his power and in 1603, was appointed shogun by the emperor. He established a new shogunate in the city of Edo, modern-day Tokyo, ushering in an era that would bear his family's name. The Tokugawa shogunate would rule Japan for over 250 years, a period of remarkable peace, stability, and deliberate isolation from the outside world. This great peace had a profound and paradoxical effect on the samurai class. With no more wars to fight, the samurai, who constituted the ruling elite of the Tokugawa social hierarchy, were forced to transition from active warriors into a class of bureaucrats, administrators, and scholars. They managed the domains of their daimyo, served in the shogunate's vast administration, and oversaw the legal and social order. Their role became hereditary, and a strict social hierarchy was enforced, placing the samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and at the bottom, merchants. The iconic twin swords of the samurai, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi, became symbols of status rather than instruments of daily combat. This created a fundamental tension. How does a warrior class maintain its identity and purpose in an age of profound peace? The answer in part was through the formalization and idealization of their warrior code. It was during the long peace of the Edo period that Bushido was most extensively written about and romanticized, transformed from a pragmatic set of battlefield ethics into a refined philosophy of moral conduct and spiritual discipline. Martial arts evolved from combat techniques, jutsu, into paths of self-improvement, do, such as kenjutsu, the art of the sword, becoming kendo, the way of the sword. Many samurai also immersed themselves in cultural and aesthetic pursuits, becoming patrons and practitioners of the arts, such as no theater, the tea ceremony, ink painting, and poetry.
However, the Edo period also brought economic challenge. While the merchant class, theoretically at the bottom of the social ladder, grew increasingly wealthy and influential, many samurai, particularly those of lower rank, found themselves in financial difficulty. Their income was a fixed stipend, paid in rice, which often did not keep pace with the rising cost of living in a burgeoning consumer economy. Many fell into debt to the very merchants they officially disdained, creating further social friction and a sense of unease within the ruling class. The samurai were trapped, a privileged but often impoverished elite in a world that was slowly changing around them. This long self-imposed isolation came to an abrupt and jarring end in a squadron of American warships, commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry, steamed into Edo. These black ships, with their steam power and modern cannons, presented a technological superiority that Japan could not match. Perry delivered a demand from the U.S. president to open Japan to trade, and he promised to return the following year for an answer. The arrival of the black ships plunged the Tokugawa shogunate into a profound crisis. It exposed the country's military weakness and shattered the foundations of its isolationist policy, sparking intense debate and political turmoil. Some factions advocated for resisting the foreigners, while others argued that Japan must open up and modernize to avoid the fate of colonization that had befallen other Asian nations. The crisis led to the collapse of the Tokugawa shogunate's authority. A coalition of powerful southern domains, led by ambitious young samurai, rallied around the slogan "Revere the Emperor, expel the barbarians." In 1868, they successfully overthrew the shogunate and announced the Meiji Restoration, restoring direct imperial rule under the young Emperor Meiji. This was not a return to the past, but the beginning of a radical top-down revolution. The new Meiji government, led by the very samurai who had overthrown the old order, embarked on a rapid and comprehensive program of modernization, modeling their government, industry, and military on Western examples. In this new modernizing Japan, the samurai class, the institution that had defined the nation for centuries, was seen as an anachronism. A hereditary warrior elite was incompatible with the creation of a modern, centralized nation. The Meiji leaders, in a remarkable act of self-abnegation, systematically dismantled the very class from which they had emerged. In a series of reforms in the 1870s, the domains of the daimyo were abolished and replaced with prefecture. The samurai were stripped of their exclusive right to wear two swords, their most cherished symbol of status. Their riced stipends were converted into government bonds, often at a fraction of their former value. And, most significantly, a modern, conscripted national army, open to all social classes, was created in 1873, making the samurai's traditional military function obsolete. These reforms were a profound shock to the millions of men who had been raised to believe they were the moral and social backbone of the nation. While some samurai successfully transitioned into new roles as officers, bureaucrats, businessmen and intellectuals, many others were left impoverished and adrift, their sense of identity and purpose destroyed. This discontent erupted in a series of armed rebellions, culminating in the last and most famous samurai uprising, the Satsuma Rebellion. It was led by Saigo Takamori, a revered figure who had been a key leader in the Meiji Restoration, but had become disillusioned with its radical policies. Saigo led a small army of traditionalist samurai against the new imperial conscript army. In a final tragic battle, the samurai, fighting with swords and traditional valor, were defeated by the superior firepower and numbers of the modern army. Saigo's death marked the definitive end of the samurai as a military and political force. The abolition of the samurai class was the necessary, if painful, price of Japan's modernization. Yet, the legacy of the samurai did not vanish. The ethos of Bushido, transformed and reinterpreted, continued to permeate Japanese culture, its ideals of discipline, loyalty, honor, and self-sacrifice influencing everything from military conduct to corporate culture and education in the 20th century. The romantic image of the noble, sword-wielding warrior has become a powerful and enduring symbol of Japanese identity, both within Japan and around the world, endlessly fascinating popular culture. The thousand-year saga of the samurai is a profound story of evolution, adaptation, and obsolescence. It traces the journey of a social class from its origins as mounted warriors serving provincial lords, to its rise as the undisputed rulers of a feudal nation, to its transformation into a peaceful administrative elite, and finally, to its poignant demise in the face of a new and unfamiliar world. It is a story that encapsulates the perennial tension between tradition and modernity, a testament to the enduring power of a code of honor, and a melancholy reflection on how even the most powerful and deeply entrenched social orders must eventually yield to the relentless currents of history. The swords have been laid down, the castles have become museums, but the spirit of the samurai continues to echo through the cultural memory of Japan.
Scattered across the vast landscapes of the Indian subcontinent,
From the dusty plains of the Gangetic Basin to the rocky outcrops of the Deccan Plateau, stand a series of magnificent, monolithic stone pillars and inscribed rock faces. For over 2 millennia, the elegant, ancient script carved upon them was unreadable, their true meaning lost to time. They were monuments of a forgotten king, silent witnesses to a forgotten age. It was only in the 19th century, through the patient work of scholars, that the script was deciphered, and the astonishing story of the man who erected them was brought back into the light of history. He was Ashoka of the Mauryan dynasty, a ruler who began his reign as a ruthless conqueror, and, after a moment of profound crisis, transformed himself into one of the most benevolent and philosophically driven emperors the world has ever known. His story is a powerful epic of imperial ambition, brutal warfare, and a remarkable spiritual transformation that changed the course of a major world religion. The stage for Ashoka's reign was set by his grandfather Chandragupta Maurya, who in the late 4th century BCE founded the Mauryan Empire, the first great unified state to encompass most of the Indian subcontinent. Guided by the shrewd and unsentimental political philosopher Kautilya, whose treatise, the Arthashastra, advocated for a pragmatic and often ruthless statecraft based on espionage, military power and centralized control, Chandragupta forged a powerful and efficient empire. His son, Bindisara, continued to rule over this vast domain, maintaining its strength and stability. It was into this world of imperial power politics that Ashoka was born. As a young prince, Ashoka demonstrated immense talent and ambition. He served as a viceroy in distant provinces, proving himself to be a capable administrator and a formidable military commander. The ancient text, particularly Buddhist legends, paint a dark picture of his rise to the throne following his father's death. These accounts claim that Ashoka engaged in a bloody succession struggle, killing many of his own brothers to eliminate all rivals and secure his claim to the imperial title. While the historical accuracy of these tales is debated, they contributed to his early reputation as Chandashoka, meaning Ashoka the Fierce, or the Cruel, a ruler who was driven by an unyielding desire for power and was willing to use any means necessary to achieve it. For the first several years of his reign, Ashoka continued the expansionist policies of his predecessor. The Mauryan Empire was already vast, but one major independent kingdom stood in the way of complete subcontinent domination: Kalinga, a prosperous state on the eastern coast of India, in the region of modern-day Odisha. Kalinga controlled important trade routes and possessed a strong army, and its continued independence was a challenge to Mauryan supremacy. Around 2061 BCE, in the 8th year of his reign, Ashoka launched a massive invasion to conquer this final stronghold. The Kalinga War was a brutal and devastating conflict. The people of Kalinga resisted fiercely, but they were ultimately overwhelmed by the might of the Mauryan army. The aftermath of the war was horrific. Ancient sources, including Ashoka's own inscriptions, record the immense scale of the slaughter and suffering. 100,000 people were said to have been killed in the fighting, and 150,000 more were captured and deported, with many more perishing from the subsequent famine and disease that ravaged the conquered land. After the successful but bloody campaign, Ashoka toured the newly conquered territory. It was here, amidst the devastation, that the pivotal moment of his life occurred. As he looked out upon the ruined cities, the burned fields, and the countless dead and dying, he was overcome not with the pride of a conqueror, but with a profound and agonizing sense of remorse. The immense suffering he had inflicted upon the people of Kalinga, the weeping of those who had lost their loved ones, the destruction of a once vibrant society, all of it weighed heavily upon his conscience. This was not a political calculation, it was a deep, personal crisis of the spirit. The fierce warrior king was shattered by the consequences of his own ambition. In the wake of this profound emotional upheaval, Ashoka began to seek a different path. He encountered the teachings of the Buddha, a philosophy that had arisen in India several centuries earlier, but was still one among many religious and philosophical schools. He was drawn to its core principles of ahimsa, or nonviolence towards all living beings, its emphasis on compassion, mindfulness, and the alleviation of suffering. He converted to Buddhism, and this conversion was not merely a private matter of faith. It became the new foundation for his entire approach to governance. The man once known as Chandashoka dedicated himself to becoming Dharmashoka, Ashoka the pious, the champion of Dharma. Dharma, a complex Sanskrit term, can be understood in this context as righteousness, moral virtue,
and the universal law of right conduct. Ashoka envisioned a new kind of empire, one held together not by the sword, but by a shared commitment to these moral principles. He renounced aggressive warfare and military conquest, which he called Digvijaya, or conquest by the sword, in favor of a new policy, Dharma Vijaya, or conquest by righteousness. He declared that his greatest joy would now come not from conquering new lands, but from persuading people, both within his empire and beyond its borders, to live according to the precepts of Dharma. To communicate this radical new vision to his vast and diverse empire, Ashoka utilized a unique and enduring medium. He had his teachings, his edicts, carved into stone on magnificent, highly polished monolithic pillars and upon prominent rock faces throughout his realm. These edicts were written in local vernacular languages, using various scripts, ensuring that his message could be understood by the common people, not just the educated elite. Dozens of these inscriptions have survived, scattered across India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, providing direct insight into the mind and philosophy of this extraordinary ruler. The content of these edicts is remarkable. They are not dry legal codes or boasts of military victory, but personal appeals from the emperor to his subjects. He expresses his deep remorse for the Kalinga War, the only conquest he describes in detail, as a way of explaining his profound change of heart. He advocates for the core principles of Dharma, non-violence towards all beings including animals, respect for parents, teachers and elders, kindness and liberality towards friends, acquaintances and ascetics, and decent treatment of servants and enslaved people. He preached religious tolerance, urging his subjects to respect one another's beliefs, and to avoid sectarian conflict, declaring that to honor another's religion is to honor one's own. He spoke of his own efforts to live by these principles, framing himself not as a divine king, but as a fatherly guide to his people, whom he called his children. Ashoka's commitment to Dharma was not merely rhetorical. It was translated into extensive public works that aimed to improve the welfare of his subjects. He funded the construction of hospitals for both humans and animals, a revolutionary concept at the time. He ordered the planting of banyan trees for shade and mango groves for fruit along the major roads of his empire. Wells were dug and rest houses were built at regular intervals to provide comfort and sustenance for travelers and merchants. He appointed a special class of officials, the Dharma Mahamatras, whose duty it was to travel throughout the empire, promoting righteous conduct, overseeing the implementation of his welfare policies, and ensuring the fair treatment of all people, including those in prison. He discouraged ritual sacrifices of animals and promoted vegetarianism within his own court, setting a personal example of his commitment to nonviolence. Ashoka also became the greatest patron of Buddhism in its history, playing a crucial role in its transformation from a regional Indian sect into a major world religion. He generously supported the Buddhist monastic community, the Sangha, and is credited with building thousands of stupas, dome-shaped monuments housing Buddhist relics, and viharas, or monasteries, throughout his empire. According to Buddhist tradition, he convened the Third Buddhist Council at his capital, Pataliputra, to purify the doctrine and codify the scriptures, ensuring the preservation of the faith. Most significantly, he actively sponsored the spread of Buddhism beyond the borders of. He sent out missionary delegations to distant lands to propagate the message of the Dharma. His own son Mahinda and daughter Sangamata are said to have led the mission to Sri Lanka, where they successfully converted the king and established Buddhism as the national religion, a status it still holds today. Other missions were dispatched to Southeast Asia, to modern-day Myanmar, Thailand and the Malay Peninsula. Remarkably, Ashoka's edicts also mention his sending of emissaries to the Hellenistic kingdoms in the west, to the lands ruled by Antiochus II of the Seleucid Empire, Ptolemy II of Egypt, Antigonus II of Macedonia, Magas of Cyrene, and Alexander of Epirus. While the impact of these missions in the Greek world is uncertain, they demonstrate the stunning geographical scope of Ashoka's vision for a world united by moral principles. Ashoka ruled for approximately 36 years, and after his death around 2032 BCE, the Mauryan Empire began a slow decline, eventually collapsing less than 50 years later. His successors lacked his vision and administrative skill, and the vast empire, perhaps held together more by his personal charisma and moral authority than by force in its later years, began to fragment. In a strange twist of history, Ashoka the Great Emperor was largely forgotten by mainstream Indian political history for nearly 2,000 years. While he was remembered and revered as a great Chakravartin, or ideal universal ruler, in Buddhist legends, the historical man and the details of his reign faded from memory. The great stone pillars bearing his edicts remained, but the Brahmi script in which they were written could no longer be read, their inscriptions a silent mystery, The rediscovery of Ashoka's story in the 19th century is a dramatic tale in itself. A brilliant British scholar and antiquarian named James Prinsep, working in Calcutta, became fascinated by the ancient script. Through years of painstaking work, comparing inscriptions and applying his knowledge of linguistics, in 1837, he finally succeeded in deciphering the Brahmi script. For the first time in millennia, the edicts could be read, as he and other scholars translated the inscriptions from pillars and rocks across India. A coherent picture of this forgotten emperor emerged. They were stunned to discover the story of a powerful king, who had renounced war, preached tolerance, and dedicated his reign to the moral and physical welfare of his people. The decipherment of Ashoka's edicts restored a pivotal chapter to the history of India. The reign of Ashoka the Great stands as a unique and compelling experiment in history. It is a rare example of a powerful ruler, attempting to govern a vast and diverse empire based on principles of nonviolence, compassion and universal moral responsibility. His personal transformation from a ruthless conqueror to a pious advocate for peace is one of the most profound turnarounds in the annals of leadership. While his empire did not long survive him, his legacy proved to be far more enduring. His patronage was instrumental in transforming Buddhism from a local Indian faith into a global religion that would shape the cultures of much of Asia. The Ashoka Chakra, the wheel of righteous law that adorned many of his pillars, is now at the center of the national flag of modern India, a testament to the enduring power of his ideal. His story continues to resonate as a powerful reminder of the potential for change within the human heart, the complex relationship between political power and ethical conviction, and the timeless relevance of the quest for a more just and compassionate world.
In the heart of the Cambodian jungle, where giant silk cotton and strangler fig trees wrap their powerful roots around ancient stones, lies the breathtaking remnant of a lost civilization. Here, vast temple complexes, serene stone faces, and magnificent causeways emerge from the dense tropical foliage, silent witnesses to the glory of the Khmer Empire. For over 600 years, from the 9th to the 15th century, this powerful empire dominated much of Southeast Asia, its wealth built not on gold or spices, but on an even more vital resource, water. The Khmer were masters of hydrology, creating a vast and sophisticated water management system that transformed the monsoon landscape into a fertile breadbasket, sustaining a huge population and enabling the construction of some of the most spectacular religious monuments ever conceived by humankind. At the heart of this empire was its capital, Angkor, a sprawling hydraulic city, centered around a stone masterpiece that was at once a temple, a tomb, and a perfect microcosm of the Hindu universe. Angkor Wat, the genesis of the Khmer Empire, can be traced back to the early 9th century and the rise of a visionary leader named Jayavarman II. At the time, the region was a collection of smaller, competing principalities, some under the influence of neighboring powers. Jayavarman, a Khmer prince, returned from a period of exile and through a series of military campaigns and political alliances, began the process of unifying these disparate territories. In the year 802, at a sacred ceremony on Mount Kulen, he declared himself Devaraja, or God King, a universal monarch whose divine authority was linked directly to the Hindu god Shiva. This act marked the declaration of an independent and sovereign Khmer Empire, an empire that would go on to achieve astonishing feats of engineering and artistry. The key to Khmer power and prosperity lay in their brilliant mastery of their environment. Their heartland was the floodplain surrounding the Great Tonle Sap Lake, a unique body of water connected to the Mekong River. The Tonle Sap has a remarkable reversing flow. During the dry season, it drains into the Mekong, but during the wet monsoon season, the swollen Mekong pushes water back into the lake, causing it to expand dramatically. The Khmer engineers learned to harness this annual cycle. They constructed a vast and intricate network of canals, dikes, and most impressively, enormous reservoirs known as barrages. These were massive, rectangular bodies of water, some several miles long, created by building huge earthen dikes. The West Barrage, for example, is 5 miles long and over a mile wide. This sophisticated hydraulic system allowed the Khmer to store the monsoon waters, control flooding, and irrigate their rice paddies throughout the dry season. This enabled them to produce multiple rice harvests per year, generating immense agricultural surpluses that could support a large population, including a massive labor force of artisans, builders, priests and soldiers, required for their monumental construction projects. Angkor was, in essence, a great hydraulic city, its existence predicated on this mastery of water. For centuries, a succession of Khmer god kings ruled from Angkor, each building their own state temple to honor their patron deity and to serve as their eventual mausoleum. Then, in the early 12th century, a king named Suryavarman II came to the throne. He was a powerful military leader who consolidated the empire, but his most enduring legacy was the construction of the temple that would become the ultimate expression of Khmer genius.
Angkor Wat. Built over a period of some 30 years, it was dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, a departure from the traditional Shiva worship of his predecessors. Angkor Wat is a masterpiece of harmony, symbolism, and architectural precision. It was conceived as a tangible representation of the Hindu cosmos. Its central quincunx, of 5 towers, represents the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical home of the gods in the center of the universe. The vast moat surrounding the temple, over 3 miles in circumference, symbolizes the cosmic ocean. The concentric galleries and enclosures represent the mountain ranges that surround Mount Meru. To enter Angkor Wat is to undertake a symbolic journey to the heart of creation. The entire temple is meticulously aligned to the heavens, with its main entrance facing west, a orientation associated with Vishnu, and also with funerary rites, suggesting its dual purpose as both a temple and Suryavarman's own magnificent tomb. The artistic achievements of Angkor Wat are as staggering as its architectural scale. Its walls are adorned with miles of exquisite bas-relief carvings, a stone tapestry depicting scenes from Hindu mythology and Khmer history. The most famous of these is the gallery portraying the churning of the ocean of milk, a Hindu creation myth, where gods and demons cooperate to churn the cosmic ocean to produce the elixir of immortality. Another gallery vividly depicts the great battle of Kurukshetra from the epic Mahabharata. Elsewhere, a grand procession of King Suryavarman II himself with his army is carved with incredible detail, providing an invaluable glimpse into the courtly and military life of the period. The temple is also famously decorated with carvings of nearly 2,000 apsaras, or celestial nymphs, each with a unique expression, hairstyle and costume, their serene beauty adding to the temple's divine atmosphere. The sheer logistical effort required to quarry, transport, carve and erect the millions of sandstone blocks that make up Angkor Wat, all without the use of mortar, is a testament to the incredible organizational power of the Khmer state. Following Suryavarman's death, the empire entered a period of turmoil. In 1107, Angkor was sacked by invaders from the neighboring kingdom of Champa. Out of this crisis emerged the last of the great Khmer kings, Jayavarman VII. A formidable warrior, he rallied the Khmer forces, drove out the Chams, and restored the empire. But he was also a ruler of profound spiritual conviction. Breaking with the Hindu traditions of his predecessors, Jayavarman was a devout follower of Mahayana Buddhism, and his reign was characterized by a new emphasis on compassion and social welfare. He embarked on an unprecedented building campaign, the most ambitious in Khmer history. He established a new capital city, Angkor Thom, the Great City, a vast fortified enclosure surrounded by a moat and high walls. At the very center of this new city, he built his state temple, the enigmatic and captivating Baon. The Baon is a temple unlike any other, a seemingly chaotic jumble of towers, galleries, and passages. Its most striking feature is the more than 200 massive, serene stone faces that gaze out from its many towers. These enigmatic faces, with their gentle smiles and closed eyes, are believed to be representations of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, with whom the king identified himself. To look upon the faces of the Baon is to be enveloped in an atmosphere of profound peace and contemplative spirituality. Jayavarman also built numerous other temples, such as Ta Prohm, famously left largely in the grip of the jungle, as well as an extensive network of roads, bridges, rest houses, and even 102 hospitals, reflecting his Buddhist commitment to alleviating the suffering of his subjects. The reign of Jayavarman VII marked the final great flourishing of the Angkorian civilization. The immense strain of his massive building programs, coupled with those of his predecessors, may have placed an unsustainable burden on the empire's economy and its people. After his death in the early 13th century, the Khmer Empire began a long and gradual decline. The reasons for this decline were complex. The rise of the powerful Thai kingdom of Ayutthaya to the west created a new military threat, leading to a series of wars and the eventual sack of Angkor in the 15th century. Some scholars also theorize that environmental factors may have played a crucial role. The elaborate water management system, while brilliant, may have become increasingly difficult to maintain, or perhaps a series of prolonged droughts or intense monsoons disrupted its delicate balance, leading to agricultural failure and the decline of the city's population. The state religion also shifted again, this time to the less hierarchical Theravada school of Buddhism, which may have undermined the theological foundations of the Deva Raja cult and the massive temple-building projects associated with it. Sometime in the 15th century, the Khmer court and the bulk of the population abandoned the great city of Angkor, relocating the capital southward to the area of modern-day Phnom Penh, a location better suited for the growing importance of maritime trade. Angkor was never completely lost or forgotten by the Khmer people. Its temples, particularly Angkor Wat, remained important sites of pilgrimage. However, the great city itself was gradually encroached upon and swallowed by the relentless embrace of the surrounding jungle. For centuries, its magnificent structures lay shrouded in green, known to the outside world only through vague accounts and legends. In the mid-19th century, French explorers and missionaries began to penetrate the Cambodian interior. It was the writings and sketches of the French naturalist Henri Mouhot, published in the 1860s after his death, that truly captivated the Western imagination and brought the wonders of Angkor to global attention. Mouhot, while not the first European to see the ruins, described them with a sense of romantic awe and wonder that sparked intense international interest. His work paved the way for the extensive archaeological and restoration work that began under the French colonial administration and continues to this day under international cooperation. The process of studying and conserving Angkor is a monumental task. Archaeologists have used modern technologies like aerial radar to map the full extent of the vast urban sprawl that once surrounded the stone temples, revealing a low-density city that may have been the largest pre-industrial urban complex in the world. Conservators work tirelessly to combat the effects of time, weather and the encroaching jungle, stabilizing crumbling structures and cleaning the delicate bas-relief. Today the temples of Angkor, with Angkor Wat as their crown jewel, stand as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the proud symbol of the Cambodian nation. They are a profound testament to the artistic genius, engineering prowess, and spiritual vision of the Khmer civilization. To wander through their silent, sun-dappled corridors is to be transported to another world, a world where kings built stone mountains as homes for their gods, where water was managed with breathtaking skill, and where a unique and powerful artistic vision flourished for centuries. The story of Angkor is a narrative of the intricate relationship between a civilization and its environment, a story of how human ingenuity can harness the forces of nature to create immense prosperity, but also a cautionary tale of how even the most powerful empires can ultimately decline and fade. The serene stone faces of the Baon continue to smile their enigmatic smiles, keepers of the secrets of a magnificent empire that rose, flourished and fell, leaving behind a legacy of enduring beauty and profound mystery in the heart of the Cambodian jungle.